Hello friends. In our last video we made an aura that could track the amount of avoidable lava damage I had taken over the course of a play session. So I log in on a character, I go to a raid, and it keeps a running total of how much lava damage I had taken until I switch characters, log out, quit the game, or reload my UI. Now you can imagine how that kind of thing would be useful for a few different kinds of auras, but sometimes you have one where you need to track information over a longer period of time. For example, I've made one here that tracks the amount of gold that I have looted. So the first time I loot, I get, say, 20 gold, and next time I find something to kill, I will have a total where it'll show the amount that I just looted along with how much I've looted in total. So here we go. So we saw I just looted 29 and I've looted a total of 49. Now that's great, but it's not very much fun to have that reset every time you log out. It would be much better to have an aura that can keep a total across multiple characters, across multiple times that I've played, and keep that running almost indefinitely if I wanted it to, just to see, oh, this week I made 7,800 gold from doing alts across, or alts in LFR and doing my daily quests and grinding the auction house or whatever it is. So to begin with, let's just talk a little bit about how we made this trigger work. I'm not going to go into too much detail because we have another video that I'll link in the description that kind of covers how global variables work and that sort of thing. I'm going to quickly bring up weak auras. Inside there we have this money aura, and there are only two parts that really matter. First is the trigger, which I have listening for player money, which gets fired every time the amount of money your character has gets changed. And then the event for that, it actually listens for a couple of others, but the important part is, was the event that happened something to do with player money? And if that's the case, then the amount of money I have right now gets put into a local variable so I can do stuff with it. The amount of money I used to have gets pulled from a global variable that should be tracking the total amount of money that I had the last time this thing was triggered. And then we just do a quick comparison. We say, has the amount of money I've got now increased from the amount I used to have? And if that's the case, so the money event happened because we looted money, not because we spent some at a vendor, then we say, all right, the amount that we just looted is the difference between how much I used to have and how much I have now. The total amount of money that I have looted is equal to the amount that I just looted plus whatever my old total was. And if for some reason the old total wasn't set up, then I just set that to 0 and do the math anyway. And finally I say, all right, now that I've done all these calculations, the new last amount of money I have is the amount that I have right now. So the next time it comes in, all of this work that we just did is going to be taken into account and I can just continue. And finally we return true so that weak auras knows, yep, I need to display this aura. In our display function, we just pull out that information. So we say the amount that we just looted is coming out of that global variable, and if it hasn't been set, we use 0. And likewise, our total comes out of a global variable, and if not, it's set to 0. And then I use the built-in getCoinTextureString method to just get a nice formatted silver, gold, copper display for that money. And finally, I string that all together into just a nice color-coded string with the values in there, so it's easy to see and read. So not much going on there. The problem we have is that our total will get reset if I do a /console reload UI or switch characters or log out. To work around that, what we need to do is know a little bit about how Warcraft lets add-on authors save information. It'd be no good to have an add-on system if every single time you made changes, you had to go and reconfigure the custom add-on from scratch, and if end users had to do work like editing Lua just to reposition their unit frames. Some nerds might do that, but it would be a lot less accessible than the ones in Warcraft are. So what happens is an add-on author needs to instruct Warcraft that there's some information it needs to save and restore for us. And the way you do that is in your TOC file for the add-on. Every add-on will have one. You put a line that says saved variables, and then you list out the names of all the variables you want Warcraft to save for us. So weak auras says there's this variable called weak auras saved, and inside of that I'm going to put all the information I need to last between different sessions. And one thing we can do is type /dump weak auras saved, and we can see what's in that variable right now. So one thing you can spot right away is this key called frame. And inside that has all of the information about where the options window is located, so its size and its position on screen. If you scroll up through this list, you'll find some icon caching, and depending on how far this will let me scroll, we'll also see just the tail end of the configuration for an actual aura. So here we see ID money and things like desaturation state and its width. And that's actually the variables or the table that controls this aura itself. And if I export this to a Lua table, we can actually see all of that. So it's got the anchor position, the font size, the display stack count, the custom code inside of our triggers. All of that is inside this table, which is inside of weak auras saved. Now, if I was to log out, I would see that Warcraft has saved that information to disk. And what Warcraft will do is say, okay, give me all the save variables, what add-ons are they for, and then it comes into this WTF folder, and inside of the account folder, you're going to have subfolders for every Warcraft account you have. So if you have a newer account, it'll be numbers, and if you have an older account, it's going to be your old login name from, I think they switched this in Classic actually, I'm not really sure, but it's been changed for at least 5 years. Anyway, go inside your Warcraft account and you will have a save variables folder, and then you'll have a file for every single add-on you've got installed. So here I have weak auras, and if I look inside there, I see that weak aura is saved, displays, and then I can see the configuration for my lava aura and also for my money aura. If I scroll down, I'll find the saved information about the frame as well. There it is. Now we can see there's a whole pile of stuff in here. There's information about every aura, and then a bunch of stuff that weak auras uses internally as well. But we know that if we modify this variable, that information is going to be saved when we log out and restored when we log back in. So what we can do is put information in here, and we have a location where we know where to look for it. Now, this variable controls all of weak auras, so we have to be very careful, because if we screw up, we could maybe overwrite auras or make them behave incorrectly, or maybe make weak auras even fail to load. But as long as we're careful and we keep a backup of our WTF folder so that we keep a known good state we can always restore to, we're not going to run into too much trouble, I don't think. So let's get started on using this new information we've learned. If we bring up our auras, and I come into my money aura, I look under the trigger, I can come into this location here where I do all the calculations and I get ready to display everything, and I can just save the information by pushing it into weak auras saved. So I can do weak auras saved, and then I can put any sort of key I want, and I can set it to the variable I want to save. So I'm going to say touchy total is actually what I want. Control V. And that's all I have to do. Now, I need to give it a key, a name that I can access it by. And while I could put anything I want to be pretty careful, because if I accidentally overwrite another aura, or I step on something weak auras is using internally, I could screw everything up. The way I like to do this is to store the variable inside the aura itself. And the way you do that is to access a subtable called displays, and then inside of that, come back to our WTF folder, save variables, weak auras. Inside of displays, we have one key for each of the auras we have. So if I just use my money aura, which is named money, I can put something inside of here, like say WA touchy total. I like to give it the key the same name as the global variable so I know what's being tracked in there. This will save the information. So that's easy enough to demonstrate. I'm just going to hit done. And we're halfway through what we need to finish. So we'll just kill a couple of these guys. And hopefully they've dropped some copper. So I can see I've got a total of 17 right now. And if I look inside the Lua table here, and I scroll through, I can find that key. A little harder than it looks because it's so long. There we go. So now inside of our aura, we have our saved value. And that's good because if we reload our UI and we come and we check our folder here, now it's detected that this file has changed when I reloaded my UI. So I'm just going to say, yep, let's see what the changes are. And here's our money aura. We're just going to scroll down and I can see that that key was created inside my aura and it has the previous total. So that means Warcraft saved that information for us. It's packed inside our aura and it's going to survive reboots now and relogs and changing characters. So if I maybe try and get some more copper from these guys, we're going to see that it didn't work. So I'm going to loot this. And what the hell, only 31, but we know that it was saving our variable. And the problem is we need to also initialize it. So setting that value will cause it to be saved, but we also need to read it back in before we use it the next time. So this line here is doing the saving, and it's pushing it into this table. I'm going to copy it so I don't have to retype it. And we have to initialize our total from the one that we saved. So I'm going to come into our first setup here, and I'm going to do something like, what this line does is say, I want a variable called WA Touchy Total, and I want its value to be either what it already is, which would happen if it's already been set up. If it hasn't been set up, then set it to 0. And all I'm going to do is add an additional thing that it does before it sets it to 0. I'm going to say, try reading it from the save variables. So now it's going to load up, try to set itself to what value it already had. If that fails, it's going to try and pull it from the save variables that we've been saving here. But sometimes that won't work. For example, if this is the first time we've ever used this add-on, this won't be set up yet. And if that happens, then we're just going to set it to 0 so everything will keep working. And I suppose in principle we could do that here too. Just put that there. What am I doing here? Total equals looted plus or. There we go. And I suppose if you wanted to be really anal, I could also do it inside my display function, just that I always show the last amount instead of a 0. You don't really need to, but why not? So I'm going to hit done. And now I'm going to go and get some more copper to make sure our total is working nicely. So we're going to loot this. We see we got 32 copper. Our total is 63. So I'm going to reload my UI, or this could be logging out or exiting the game and coming back. And we should see that our variable is set up now. And it'll have the value that was saved from the last time we played. So we're going to loot 27 copper. We can see our total is 90. So our information survived through logging out or reloading our UI. That's great. Everything is working as we expected it to. Now the last thing to point out is that this information is stored inside the aura by name. All of these keys are sort of hard-coded in here to money. So if you rename the aura, you're going to be leaking that information into places you probably don't expect it. You'll create a new key and it's just a mess. So make sure that the stuff you put in here matches this. And if you edit the name, you go back and edit your trigger and I guess our display function in this case. Now, one other thing to know is that when you export this to a string, all of that Lua table gets converted into this encoded text. So even though you can't really read it, that save variable is in there. If I delete this and reload my UI, we'll see that the information can be brought back when I import that string. So bring up weak auras, hit import, paste, done, import, sure. And if I export this to a table, we're going to find that my total was kept in there. So for some things that might be really useful if you wanted to share an aura tracking how many times you had wiped with your guildmates. You're probably raiding with them, so they're going to have a starting total that's similar to yours. If they weren't using the aura before, that number is going to be a little bit off, but it's still better than starting at 0 midway through progression. Other times you'll have information you don't want to leak out. Maybe you're, I don't know, tracking the names of all the players that you've hit on when you were doing random dungeons. And you don't want to leak that out because it would be embarrassing. In order to solve that problem, what we can do is just clear out this variable that we're loading and saving to before we export our aura to share it. So I'm going to copy and paste because typing this is super long. Although, there we go. So I'm just going to copy that, hit done, and do /run, access that variable, and just set it to 0. And now, if I export that to a string, or maybe to a table so we can read it, we can see that the value is 0. So if we share the aura now, it's not going to have that private information in it. I guess that's really all I wanted to say. Maybe that's useful. Once you start going this far, you should probably really consider doing a custom add-on because you're well outside the scope of what was intended with weak auras, but this stuff does work, and sometimes you just need a quick hack that takes 10 minutes to put together, and that's better than spending an hour writing a proper add-on and doing all the testing and sharing it with your friends. So, good to know. Plus it'll be helpful if you ever decide to do proper add-on development. Getting kind of your toes wet before you jump in is good to know. I think that's enough. That's gone almost 15 minutes, I think. Good night.